Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Julian Crocker. He is the Superintendent for San Luis Obispo County. It's an elected position. And so I want to speak with you about a proposal that came out of the California legislature. Both the Senate Pro Tem and the Speaker of the Assembly have argued that we should have what's called transitional kindergarten. Mandatory. Well, would it be mandatory? What would the rule be exactly?
It would be mandatory.
Okay.
At least the current proposal is right. Yeah, and it would basically add another grade. Is essentially, and for 4-year-olds, and it's now modified for transitional kindergarten, and so there's a lot of talk about that.
There has been a lot of talk. Both those two leaders have suggested they want to see that be part of the public education system. What's interesting is, as you may know, Governor Brown, when he issued his January 2014 proposal for the budget, he did not include funding for TK, we'll call it. But yet the Speaker and the Pro Tem are still behind this plan. What do you think?
Well, there's no question about the value of early childhood education. So I think everyone who looks at the research, and certainly those of us in schools, know the goal would be to have universal preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds.
Wow.
Actually, the high-performing countries around the world, that's what they have. So we're moving in that direction. The issue in California is paying for, in essence, adding another grade for all 4-year-olds. So it's not a philosophical disagreement, it's more a practical disagreement about how to pay for it.
Right, and let's talk about that practicality, because as you know, miracle of miracles, we are in surplus right now.
Right.
There's no question that the combination of the passage of Prop 30 and an improving economy has allowed California to see more money come in. So one could say, what a perfect time to launch this new program, this TK program, but we may not be in surplus.
Well,
in a few years, and as I understand it, the program could cost about $1 billion a year once fully rolled out.
Right, and I think the governor's position is, I have a debt that I owe to the public schools for all the cuts that have been made previously, and that's my first obligation, is to make good on that. And I think that's why he's probably hesitant to say, oh yes, even though this is a great idea, we also need to fund another grade.
Right, and we also have to realize that while we may be in surplus, California has significant debt that needs to be paid off, and the governor seems to be making that a priority as well.
Correct.
But in your mind, sir, is this something that really necessitates a fight? I mean, is it so valuable that it's worth fighting for?
That's a great question, because if somebody said to me, what would be the single thing you could do to close the achievement gap, it would be this.
You're kidding.
Absolutely.
You feel that strongly.
Absolutely.
But TK is that valuable.
A universal preschool, full day preschool. Now that's another whole issue. Is it half day or not?
Right. I think that the proposal is half day at this stage.
Right. But if it was a combination of a preschool program and an after school care program that we know how to do with quality preschool, if there was a single thing to close the gap, that would be it for 3- and 4-year-olds. It's particularly effective, Brad, for English language learners. It's simple. I mean, it's intuitive. A youngster learns English at an early age. And also for youngsters in poverty.
What about the question that we have now changed the age within which a child can begin kindergarten? So does that beg the question that since we've made it, you need to be older sooner, that maybe this is a perfect time to bring in TK, because there are kids that are now not able to start kindergarten when they would have a few years ago.
And that's exactly Senator Steinberg's position. Is we've already kind of started down this road, so let's expand what we already have to include all 4-year-olds.
Do you think it happens?
It'll be this balance between what we know should happen and the ability to pay for it. It's a tough situation.
I hear you. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back with Julian Crocker. So, sir, let's shift gears, if we may, and talk about the question of funding most generally, not just specific to TK and K, but generally. As you know, we are facing what I would call a revolution in education funding. We are changing the way we fund our schools, away from categoricals and mandates from Sacramento to more discretion with the local districts. What do you think about that philosophically, this whole notion of devolving power down to the districts?
I'm absolutely supportive of it. Research shows that any large system, and school districts are large systems,
Right.
to make progress, you need to, number one, have high expectations or standards, and then allow people closest to where the work is done make the decisions. And the third part is hold them accountable.
Right.
So
But
those are the three elements in this plan.
that's what I wonder is, with the new formula, is there the accountability element that there had been with categoricals, which had very strict standards?
I think it's much more accountable because the new accountability system focused on student results, what actually happens in terms of student progress. The old accountability system under categoricals tended to more fill in the boxes. Yes, we've spent so much money here, so much money here. It's more focused on input, if you will. The newer system, which I support, is, if you will, output.
So let me ask you about one significant element of the funding scheme, and that's the local control funding formula, which provides additional funds for school districts that teach, let's say, disadvantaged students. English language learners, foster kids, those kids that are coming from economically disadvantaged homes. We look at San Luis Obispo County as a microcosm in a lot of ways of a lot of counties, in that you will have school districts that will see a lot more funding because they educate many of these targeted kids. You will have districts that will not see that additional funding.
Right.
How is that going to play out?
Well, in our county, it's interesting because those districts that perhaps would not receive as much money because of the demographics, actually, as you and I have talked before, are now basic aid districts.
Right.
So they already have a degree of advantage because they are directly funded through their local property
Is basic
tax.
aid surviving in this new regime?
So far, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no one is losing their basic aid status right now.
Okay.
They're held harmless, if you will.
Okay.
And we believe on coastal California, with property values essentially continuing to go up and not a great growth in the student population, that the basic aid districts will remain.
So what about districts, I don't know if there are any in this county, that don't quite meet basic aid requirements, but also don't have that threshold of 55% in the targeted categories? So they'll get the 20% bump per student, but they won't get that big 50% bump because they reach the 55% threshold. What about those districts?
So in the short term, there may be some inequities here, but the whole idea is that within 6 or 7 years, everybody is at a set target, which is much higher. So I think you're right. There will be some districts, a few, frankly, not a lot, that will be somewhat less funded to start with.
But is that
eventually
fair?
they'll
I
end
mean,
up.
is that-
Well,
I know life's not fair, but
well, and we've got 1,000 school districts
Right.
in California, so
Right.
I think
you do the best you can.
and from my point of view, this shift is worth it.
Let's talk about the participation element of the LCFF. There's something called the LCAP, lots of acronyms, I'm sorry,
Right.
which is the Local Control Accountability Plan. Did I say that right?
You're
And
good.
so that seeks input from the community on how they want their district to use their new discretion.
Right.
Have you started to get some results from what the community's saying?
We're starting that right now. We're working with our local boards because they are the ones that are holding these
Right.
meetings or the surveys. Right now, districts are already starting to send surveys out.
Right.
A number of our districts, of course, will use the online. But you're exactly right, Brad. That's a major emphasis and change.
Any
is
early
reaching
results?
out.
Do you know what's coming?
We
What
have
there's-
no. It's too
Okay.
early in the system. They don't have to adopt this until July. So we've got the spring, if you will, to work on this.
So what do you predict? What do you think they're going to say? I mean,
Well-
you got your finger on the pulse generally.
Yeah. I think generally people in our county are pleased with the schools. The scores
Right.
continue to go up, et cetera, this kind of thing. I think it's one of those things that's going to take a few years to roll out because this is new. Parents aren't used to being involved this way. And it's really incumbent upon local boards to really be very serious and intentional about this. So I think it's an interesting question in 3 years from now, what are parents saying? I think it's going to take that long to get used to this whole idea that they indeed have a voice in their local policies.
Okay, his name is Julian Crocker. He is the superintendent for San Luis Obispo County. My name is Brad Pomerance. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Chris Ungar. He's a trustee at San Luis Coastal, but he's now vice president of the California School Boards Association. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
What percentage of students in California are English language learners? 16, 25, 31, or 36%? According to the PPIC, nearly 25% of California students are English language learners.
It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Chris Ungar, he is a trustee with the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. He's also the new vice president of the California School Boards Association. Congratulations again, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Brad.
That is an organization for the entire state.
Right. The California School Boards Association represents 5,000 school board members in California and about 1,000 school districts, though we have about 960 to 965 school districts who are members of our organization.
You are on your way to becoming president. I mean, this is a natural progression. I mean, it's the way it's structured.
Right. And I was elected vice president. This year, I have to run for president-elect, and if I'm elected president-elect, then I will become president.
So congratulations,
in 2016.
San Luis County is very fortunate and lucky to
I'm
have
very
you.
happy.
I know as a result of your deep involvement in school boards, you recently went to Washington, D.C.
I did.
So tell us about that trip, sir.
Well, it was a really exciting trip. It was a legislative advocacy trip. And there was some things that were just amazing, Brad. The first is that we got to hear from Bob Woodward.
The Bob Woodward?
The Bob Woodward
of Watergate fame?
Of Watergate fame.
That's interesting.
And he told us about experiences that he had. He shared with us a book that he's writing about the Obama administration. Very interesting. And then we heard from Dr. Bernice King, who is the daughter of Martin Luther King.
Oh, wow.
So it was very inspiring. And then what we did is we went into the various governmental agencies and we talked to different people. So for example, my group got to talk to staff from Barbara Boxer's office.
Our U.S. Senator.
Our U.S. Senator from California. We spoke to representatives from the White House.
Wow.
And that was really exciting because what the White House is doing is really moving initiatives forward for kids of color. And so we met with a representative of their Hispanic initiative and a representative of their African American initiative, as well as somebody from special education. We talked with those folks.
I want to ask you though, right now California is in a bit of a battle, although it may have subsided, over its adoption of Common Core. It is adopting Common Core, but as part of the adoption, the state is going to offer standardized tests this spring that may or may not be reported, and under federal law, if you don't report those scores, you could lose some federal funding.
Yeah, we haven't heard a resolution of that yet, and we actually spoke to the folks from the White House
about that
issue. You know, they didn't have a lot to say about it, but we wanted them to be aware that this is something we're concerned about.
Right.
The reason that we're not reporting the test scores is because it's absolutely unfair to judge kids based on a brand new test, based on a curriculum that they're just learning. And we think that this should inform instruction, but we don't believe that it's fair to the kids
Let me ask you though, are school districts throughout the state even ready for this new test, which must be done on a computer?
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard many school districts are not ready.
And you know, the readiness it's coming along. It's interesting that you mentioned that because one of the things that we did back in Washington, D.C. is that we talked to the Federal Communications Commission. Because we have a lot of school districts in California that have problems with connectivity. And so what we want to do is make sure that there is enough money to help connect schools to the internet.
It's interesting. While you were there, did President Obama not announce his desire to have schools be wireless?
He did on the day we were there. We were able to meet with the commissioner from the Federal Communications Commission to talk about that. And it's so interesting to me because I have a friend who has a son in the Peace Corps in Africa.
And they have internet.
And how do they communicate with each other? They communicate through text messages and through the internet.
When we come back, I want to talk more about standardized tests, specifically the SAT and the ACT. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. Sir, you and I have been speaking about the SAT and the ACT for over a year now because I have been very concerned that with the adoption of Common Core, changing the way that students are educated away from kind of No Child Left Behind standardized drilling to a more broad-based approach that's a little, would it be thicker and not as deep? Is that, am I saying it correctly?
Yeah. We talk about the inch deep and the mile wide.
Exactly.
We're hoping to go a mile deep and more than an inch wide,
Right, no,
of
I hear
course.
you.
But yeah,
But the point is that I've expressed concern that the SAT organization and the ACT organization would not adjust their tests for a Common Core world. Last month, you told me that you talked to the SAT folks and they said?
they said that they are adjusting the test, that they are changing the test. In 2015, they said that the PSAT, which is what high school, I believe it's sophomores, juniors take, which gives an indication of where they are and might help determine whether they become National Merit Scholars or not.
Right.
That's changing in 2015 in recognition of the Common Core.
But that-
and then in 2016, the SAT is changing.
But this is frustrating to me still because, so you take the SAT in 11th grade, maybe 12th grade. For 8, 9 years, 10 years, you've been educated in a No Child Left Behind world. For 1 year, or maybe 2, you're educated in a Common Core era. And then they change the test for common.
It is going to. I think it's going to present some tremendous challenges for college admissions officers.
The scores could be everywhere.
What do you believe about the aptitude of a student and their ability to be successful in college? And you and I have talked about this, and how much of that can you really base on a standardized test? Now, the standardized test makers would claim,
but
well, this absolutely will do it.
But it's a
we don't
standardized
know.
test that may not be testing
Right.
what the students have learned because we're changing the way students learn. To make matters even more complicated, the SAT is becoming less popular
Right.
in favor of what's known as the ACT.
Yes.
And I thank you because you have contacted the ACT organization to
I
see what
did.
they're going to do.
Right, and I was able to speak with a representative of the ACT people. Philip Weeks was the guy's name, as a matter of fact, and he and I spent about 20 or 30 minutes
Wow.
on the phone going over some of these things. What he explained to me was that the ACT is more of a curriculum-based test, which I thought
Already.
was very interesting. Already. It tests 4 things. It tests
Right.
reading, it tests English, it tests math, and it tests science.
Which the SAT does not.
the SAT does not.
Right.
There's an optional writing test.
Right.
What he told me was that their test is built on discussions that they have with educators from college through elementary school based on what curriculum they're teaching. So different from my understanding of the SAT.
So if
he
you
says they're in constant conversation with these folks, and he said that the ACT people sat down with the creators of the Common Core and worked with the creators of the Common Core as they were building the standards.
sounds like they're way ahead of the game.
It does. Now, he did say, though, that there are no plans to make major changes to the test, that they will go along and slowly make changes, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Probably one could argue would be wise, although who knows?
Well, and that's what he said, because what he said college admissions people were concerned about is if you change the test drastically, then you change the interpretation of
Right.
the test for college admissions.
One of the big changes that we will see with the secondary and primary standardized testing through Common Core is what's called adaptive tests, where if you get the first question right, you'll get a harder question. Second, if you get the first question wrong, you'll get an easier question. Will the SAT and ACT look like that?
I don't know, and I didn't ask about that. As far as I was going to say I think they're pencil and paper tests, but they're not pencil and paper tests.
They're going to be on computer now?
I thought they were, and this is something I could check.
No, it's all good. It's just so much is happening right
boy.
now. And my daughter's 6th and 4th grade. They're right in the eye of that storm. And so when it's time for them to take the SAT or the ACT, what's it going to look like?
And I don't think we can know. I'm hopeful that they make the changes to align themselves with the Common Core, because the Common Core really does, I believe, reflect things that kids need for college and career readiness. And that's what I'm hopeful of.
We'll have to see. Okay, his name is Chris Ungar. He is a trustee with the San Luis Coastal Unified School District. He is also the vice president of the California School Boards Association, an honor he received in December of 2013. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
What percentage of the California class of 2013 took the SAT exam? 38, 46, 57, or 64%? 57% of California's 2013 graduating seniors or 234,767 students took the SAT exam, a state record.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brett Pomerance. We are joined by Jim Erb. Get ready, the longest title in politics. He is, for San Luis Obispo County, already long, 3 words in that county title,
Right.
Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator. That's an elected position, by the way. He will be running for re-election in June. But there's a story behind this. It didn't used to be that all 5 positions were under one elected official. Let's have some fun. Tell us how this happened.
Well, that's correct. The Auditor Controller has always been separate from the Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator.
Okay, so there were 2 offices.
There were 2 offices.
Auditor Controller was one elected position.
Correct.
Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator, another elected position.
Correct.
But then there was kind of a perfect storm back in
Right.
2012.
Right, where both the elected officials left the offices and leaving them open. I was appointed to Auditor Controller, and the Board of Supervisors.
Oops, little did you know.
Little did I know
Right.
that the administrative office and Board of Supervisors was considering combining these offices in an attempt to save money and have some efficiencies.
But what's interesting is that because of the simultaneous retirements, it made it more plausible and possible, because since they're both elected positions, you need to make sure that they remain elected positions. Explain.
Absolutely, that's what happened. The California law allows the 2 departments to combine as long as they're still under an elected official. To remove them from an elected official into what they call a Department of Finance
Right.
or Director of Finance, you have to have the vote of the public to do that.
But because they both retired, there wasn't kind of a turf war going on.
Right.
So what did you think? I mean, you became the Auditor Controller. Were you aware that in the background there was a possibility you would take on the role also of Treasurer, Tax Collector, and Public Administrator?
I was.
Okay.
It had been
So
talked
you
about.
knew it was coming down the pike.
I knew it might come down the pike. It's happened in about 11 counties.
Ah,
And
okay.
some of them are just real small counties, so it kind of made sense.
Sure.
But we're seeing this combination. Our offices work very closely together.
Right.
We were situated right next to each other. And the big drawback to, or the big argument against doing this is you kind of got the hen guarding, or the fox guarding the hen house.
I got it.
So the treasurer takes in the cash and the auditor pays the bills.
Okay.
And you kind of don't want to mix those two combinations for internal control purposes.
So what do you do?
So now our computer systems are so sophisticated that we can set security roles for various people in the office. So I can sit next to you, you can pay a bill and I can't, but I can make a deposit and you can't.
I see.
And it leaves a fingerprint of every transaction that happens.
And that has become one of your most difficult tasks, is implementing this system.
It
You have a
was.
whole new accounting system, a whole new HR system, payroll system. Talk to us about that, sir.
Correct. It's took about 3 years to do that. We
Wow.
went off a 27-year-old mainframe system. And I was called in another time,
Right.
caught by
Oops.
surprise.
Right.
I was called into the auditor's office and he
Right.
said, "Jim, would you like to lead this?" And I said, "Sure, sounds like
Right,
fun."
yeah.
Little
And this
did
was
I know-
prior to your ascension to
Right.
the top dog.
Little did I know it was going to take 3 years out of my life. And
So how's the process going? I mean,
it's good. We've been able to, we're successful with it.
Right.
It's happened in other counties where they're
Right.
not. Any accountant that's implemented a new accounting system will know that the chances of failure are big.
And what's interesting is the office became much larger than it had been. When you combined, how many employees joined you?
We had about 40 employees prior to the combination,
Right.
and then we picked up another 28.
And has that been smooth?
Yeah, it has. It has. It's been good.
It's got to be tricky. Okay, when we come back, I want to go through each of the 5 positions, and you're going to tell me exactly what they do and how you manage to juggle all 5 positions. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back with Jim Erb of San Luis Obispo County, Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator. Sir, okay, so let's go through each of the 5 positions, because when I read through the notes, they are quite distinct.
Yes,
I mean,
they are.
You say there's overlap, but I guess at some level there is, but they're different.
Right,
They're different.
they are different.
So let's talk about the 5 positions. We'll start with auditor.
Okay, the auditor is a very important function, and that is what we make sure that people are in compliance with laws, mandates,
Right.
throughout the county.
Sure.
And so we have an internal audit division that can go out and basically we can look wherever we want.
Right.
And we look at efficiencies.
Countywide.
Countywide.
Right. A very important function.
Very important
No
function.
question.
Yeah.
Controller.
The controller pays the bills. So
Okay.
it's our accounts payable, our payroll division, and they're the ones that take in all bills, all money
Right.
through the county goes out through us. So we
Okay.
have the final check. We make sure that the money's going to the intended person for an intended
Right.
purpose.
So that was one office.
That was one
Now
office.
we're at the second office. It's been combined. Treasurer.
The treasurer's been very interesting. We are investing about $650 million on a daily average.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, and it's county money, school money, special districts. It's a variety of people that we invested for. Our biggest concern is safety.
Right.
Second is liquidity,
Right.
and third is earnings.
Okay.
So earnings takes a low priority for us, but we still like to get as good as we can.
Tax collector.
Okay,
Is this connected to the assessor?
in a sense.
But the assessor's not under your office. That's
No.
Tom Bordenero. He
Right.
has his own job.
He does.
Okay.
So the tax collector, the assessor decides how much a property is worth.
Right.
We take that information and then we extend it into the tax bills.
Okay.
So we send those bills out and we make sure that people pay the bills, and then the money comes in and we allocate it to wherever taxing jurisdiction
Sure.
the money came from.
So why isn't the tax collector with the assessor's office? Historically, if you know.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been a combination.
Really?
And I think because the assessor is actually determining the value, and that could be a conflict if you
One
have
set
somebody
of- right,
determining the
that's
value
true.
and also writing the bills.
Okay.
So
Now here's the last one. Now I got to say this, by the way. The four positions we just mentioned, the titles make sense.
Right.
The last one, public administrator, this I never would have realized what it meant. And for better or for worse, I'm a lawyer, so you would have thought I could have figured this out. I don't practice anymore, of course, but what is a public administrator?
Okay, it's the public administrator handles cases of deceased persons where there isn't somebody to handle the case or there isn't somebody willing to take the case. And
I mean, how did you get public administrator to handle those duties?
in some counties, it's just for the sheriff's department or other agencies. It has to be under an elected official.
That's it. Why?
And
I wonder if that's
I don't
interesting.
know. That's
So how often does that happen?
we get about 10 or 11 cases a year.
So it happens.
It happens, and recently we had somebody who passed away, and they owned a house free and clear.
And there was no one.
There was a sister who was in her 90s, and we called her up, and she said, "I don't want the money." And
So what did you do?
So we search and we find cousins, and
Did you find him?
we did.
And?
if we call them up and say, "Oh, by the way,"
And
we-
so
we
what do
ask-
you do?
We distribute money to them. We
How do you
liquidate.
decide? How do you decide how to do it?
Well, we have ways of tracking them down.
Right.
and-
Okay. So you find the cousins.
Right.
So let's say you find 5 cousins. You just
Right.
divide it by 20% each.
Exactly. Right.
Do you get to call those people and
We
say,
do.
by the way?
I don't call them, but my public administrator does, and it's all handled through court. It's
Right.
handled through probate court.
Okay. Now, in the final analysis, I am not one who believes that there are people that are trying to do ill internally within the government. I have faith in government workers. I'm not the one who wants to pound on government workers. At the same time, we do know there's some people that engage in unscrupulous behavior. We know
Right.
that. And as a result, you recently implemented a whistleblower hotline.
That's correct.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's becoming more and more commonplace among counties, and actually, large companies that are on the stock
Sure, of
exchange
course.
have to have one.
Right.
But it essentially gives employees a method of reporting things that they are concerned about, either
Right.
with fraud or maybe it's just
Sure.
a procedure that can be improved.
So this is for the employees to use. It's not
Mainly-
for an outsider to come in and say, I believe.
They can use it, but it's really designed for
Right.
the employees.
And how's it been?
It's been good.
Successful?
Successful. It's like you say, though, we have pretty honest people in this county.
But I guess you did ferret out some fraud. There was a parking attendant. that
I
was-
did this for LA County.
Oh,
and,
so you've
yeah,
you've
we-
seen this before.
We had some big frauds.
I can
down
only
there.
imagine. His name is Jim Erb. He is the Auditor-Controller-Treasurer-Tax Collector, Public Administrator for San Luis Obispo County. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.